Hey everybody, Steve Whittier, 40 plus BJJ. I just wanted to shoot a quick video here talking about something that I've just been writing about a little bit in the group, shared some videos also on the list. So it's stand-up grappling. And what I want to do is give you guys three common, what I consider to be pretty important misconceptions about this part of the game, and talk to you a little bit about that. So, this may come across slightly self-serving, but I'll explain why it isn't at the end. So, first big misconception about stand-up grappling is, number one, people will say, listen, I've got put in the work here for however many, a year, 10 years, 15 years, whatever. I've got escapes, I've got passing, I've got top game, I've got a guard. Basically, my grappling game is complete. So if they think about stand-up grappling at all, it's like, maybe I got one takedown, I pull guard, mostly just train on the ground, and it's really sort of all I need because there's just this little piece of the game here that is the stand-up grappling component. Well, I would counter that I felt the same way when I was first starting, and so even though I had a big striking background, my stand-up grappling game was super weak. What I came to find is really, if you look at jiu-jitsu as grappling, and you look at the entire game as grappling, then really what you're missing if you're not doing standing grappling is not 5 or 10% of the game. It's more like 50% of the game. It's been talked about a lot, but I think people still love to breeze over it. If you can't get the game to the ground, unless you're purely a guard puller trying to win medals in sport jiu-jitsu, which might be your goal at a given point in time, but should never be, in my opinion, the foundation of your jiu-jitsu game. Like, that shouldn't be the subset. That's a specialist game, right? So even though you might specialize at a point in time, or even for years, maybe for a decade, your jiu-jitsu shouldn't be based on a specific game. It should be based on really strong fundamentals that then you can branch out and create A games around those particular tactical considerations for, say, competition, or if you're more interested in self-defense, right? Tactical considerations for what type of self-defense are we talking about? If it's for no-gi grappling, for MMA, what have you, get my point. But regardless, if you can't get the game where you want it, right, or you are constantly forced to only be able to put the jiu-jitsu game in one place because you're finding that it's always being dictated where it goes. Like, in other words, everybody is always taking you down if you're doing any stand grappling at all. So there, you're forced to develop guard pulling. What you're doing is you're missing out on a big component of the game, which is the ability not only to survive when somebody does dictate where the game goes, right, but also to be able to dictate where you want it to go, right? It's very, very important. So I want to make sure that although I talk most of the time about ground positions, everybody does have that strong skill set and isn't just focusing on 50% of the game, right? So that's not only talking about self-defense or not only talking about MMA, but like just in general for your jiu-jitsu game. It's almost like you have put a blinder on to this whole reality that is this massive part of grappling. Okay, just think jiu-jitsu as grappling, not jiu-jitsu as, gi, no gi, one particular subset, right? Grappling, right? You have to have a strong game if you're going to be complete, and you have to have some ability to, if possible, dictate where it goes, as well as deal with the reality of somebody putting you in places you don't want to be, right? Like somebody takes you down because they're bigger and stronger, and you just got caught because you tripped, because somebody blindsided you, right? All these different things, reasons why you might not have a choice, but you always want to make sure that the reason why you're on the ground is not from a lack of knowledge and ability to apply stand-up grappling any more than you would neglect any of the other areas of jiu-jitsu. Okay, that's big myth number one. Number two, this is a big one because I see it all the time. I've even seen it in this group. When people start talking about having trouble with the stand-up grappling game, usually the responses are people start throwing out what they think is a lot of times a good move for them, which personal preference is not what we build a game on. And that's going to vary from person to person, body type to body type, and thought process to thought process. But most people say, well, wrestling shots, judo throws of some sort or another. Well, I've got news for you. To be able to pull those off, and there's nothing wrong with them because they're obviously high-level skill sets. The ability to, go from arm's length or more for a wrestling shot, cover distance, take somebody down is beautiful. I have the utmost respect for it. To be able to set up and chain together throws, whether it's wrestling or from judo or sambo background, things like that, throwing martial arts, beautiful. And there's a lot of overlap between all those arts. So it's not so much about the art or the particular technique. What it is how much athleticism does it take for you to be able to accomplish the goal. So if you don't have a background in those arts and have spent years, if you don't have the physicality, because really the only people I see typically that can pick up wrestling shots from even relatively close but on the outside, right? Meaning you're not already tied up, but being able to set them up from the outside are people that tend to be quite quick and explosive. So that will rule you out if you don't have those, and it will certainly rule you out as you age. Because the thing you have to understand is, especially as it pertains to wrestling, where do you see, there are wrestling clubs around, but where do you see commercial wrestling schools where people go like they do with jiu-jitsu or other things like that to, learn an art while they're getting in shape or that type of thing, right? Wrestling only exists as a competitive scholastic activity for the most part, so it means everybody in there tends to be on the younger side, and they, unless they are older and now coaching or something like that, and they're there 100% for the purpose of winning. There's not the recreational hobbyist side, it's 100% to win. So the people that you see able to pull off the shots and the higher amplitude types of throws and trips and things like that tend to be the ones who have either that years of background and or are younger and super athletic. And there are some exceptions, but painting with a broad brush, that's pretty accurate in my experience for many years. So that is not the skill set you need to try and replicate. This is something like when people say, look, I want to put on some muscle mass, and so they'll pick up Muscle and Fitness and start trying to replicate the training routines of the big, juice head bodybuilders that, first of all, are juice head bodybuilders. Second of all, are doing super high volume professional workout routines, right? That's not what you need. That's not the type of training regimen that you want to try and replicate, all right? And then the third major myth is that stand-up grappling is dangerous. And once you kind of make that statement, because it is true, I would say the vast majority of gnarlier injuries, for the most part, aside from pop ribs and things like that, take place, the shoulders going out, people folding their elbows back, breaking wrists and things like that. The gnarlier injuries are often a result of, a takedown or a throw gone bad, and not always on the impact part of it, but a lot of times just on how your body's resisting those types of movements when somebody is shooting in and taking you down or lifting you or throwing you, something like that, right? So then a lot of instructors take this tack, it's too dangerous. So what happens is then there's two schools of thought that are formed around that premise. Number one, suck it up. Hey, if you want to be good at this isn't tiddlywinks, it's not, we're not crocheting here, it's not ballet, this is fucking jiu-jitsu, so suck it up, because that's part of the game. So, take Advil, right? There's that. Not the best attitude in my opinion, although obviously you do have to be resilient and tough and experience some discomfort. This is in fact not ballet, but just taking this sort of attitude you just have to accept being beaten up every day in training and potentially get hurt all the time is not the way to go. And then the other direction that statement will take, or that thought process will take, is, well, we got to avoid it. And especially if people have a big pool of students and things, and they say for liability purpose and keeping people on the mat, we've got to avoid that. So it goes both ways. And that's not true either. much in the same way that we treat people not to spaz on each other through various techniques I've talked about in the series and in this group. I've got one of my live stream recordings in the group description about a formula for rolling. We talk about what we call advanced rolling in my organization. And I've kind of, massaged that a little bit and talked about it specifically for quote-unquote older grapplers as a primary learning tool, not as a watered-down learning tool, if you do it properly. It's not this woo-woo like flow rolling where people are doing things that create bad habits. Well, you can do the same thing. You can create flow. There's a website called Flow Grappling, but you don't necessarily need to be very high-level to create flow grappling if you have the right framework. Framework that not only includes the correct technique details, but also, or even a technical approach, but also the conceptual approach behind it, and all the primary control mechanisms of the clinch and stand-up grappling, and then understanding how to do takedowns off of that. And also, what I think is very important anytime you're talking about a conceptual framework is also how that plays into physical principles of posture and pressure that you give with your body out of that correct posture. So super important, and these are things that often get missed, glanced over. I've seen a lot of people who have, say, an entry and a stand-up grappling position and even a finish, they know all the pieces quite well, but then what happens is because their posture, their body mechanics or body structure is just slightly off, they fail because although they knew all the component pieces, there was a fundamental flaw in the foundation upon which they were trying to execute the technique. So all they know, they could teach you the details great, they could teach you even the setup, the timing and everything, and they might even get away with it, but then they're walking around all arthritic and hunched over because of the posture. So then obviously now you're prone to injury, now you're off the mat, and that only gets worse as you get older, which is to my point. Okay, so those are three big areas of misconception, and my point is that it doesn't have to be that way. So here comes the somewhat self-serving part that I'm going to try and explain that I do not mean it to be. So I released my latest Pillars of Jiu-Jitsu, Clinch and Takedowns free video series last week, and then in the announcements you'll see that I launched the program. And again, what I've kind of deviated from in the Pillars of Jiu-Jitsu is not really doing just solely to the camera kind of classical instruction, but basically I am filming the instruction pieces from my own classes in my own academy, working with everybody and take them through this progression. And the reason why I like that, and other people seem to really enjoy it, is because you're actually seeing me not just teach the core curriculum, but also respond to what I see going on the floor. So I'll kind of bring it back in and address something as I see people having common pieces that they're working on or common challenges on what they're working on, and also individual questions that I'll field. So you'll see me, as I bring people back in, kind of responding to those as well. Well, let me just bounce out of that. Okay, so I'm going to put the link is in the announcements to the course, be on sale here for a limited time. I'm also going to put the link when I publish this recording of this live stream. I'll put it in the comments. If you guys want to check it out, I think you get tremendous value. It's also 6 volumes. It's digital or DVD, and put a lot of time into it. Basically, you're seeing a couple months worth of teaching, classwork, consolidated down into the curriculum. And the people that have gotten it previously have gotten some amazingly good feedback. And this is not my personal game, right? This is basically a framework for you to understand body mechanics, all the different primary control points and entries, and then why it's important to learn the clinch game first, unless you have those years and years of grappling. But even so, a lot of the things you're going to be able to do when you're younger, you're not going to be able to do when you're older. So why forming a clinch game, whether it's gi or no gi, most of the instructions no gi, but it almost all will apply to gi, with maybe just some very minor grip variations, is going to be the framework you want to get good and get good quickly and comfortable and safely training the stand-up game, so that you're not lacking in this major area of the game. Here's why I don't feel it's completely self-serving here to come on and talk about that, because aside from escapes, I would say number one biggest request that I've had over the years for escape material, and I revised my whole escape curriculum with the Escapes Mastery that came out prior to the clinch and takedowns. And then there's obviously always people that are like, I'm trying to deal with people smashing through my guards, so they want the guard, or trying to deal with tricky guards, so they want the passing. I would say fourth after those three, biggest request is something for trying to figure out how to deal with a stand-up grappling game. And people complaining that, you know, the stand-up grappling curriculum is often either just super basic self-defense stuff only, like, which is good to know, but not so much against somebody else who knows anything about even modest level of grappling, or it's basically kind of presumes a higher level of attributes in wrestling or judo experience, but nothing that they're able to really pull off live. So this is what will help you to bridge that gap. And again, I'm going to put that in the comments right under the video. Hopefully, or I would guess, based on conversations I've had for many years and feedback I've gotten, those three misconceptions do resonate, at least one or two of them, with people, and hopefully this is very helpful to you. Okay, so I'll talk to everybody soon.